Chapter 2. Draconic Discipline. The moon had risen when Swordfish finally made it back to the rocky slopes where the dragons made their nests. His lungs were burning from all the running. He was still too young to do much more than glide with his wings, and it had been a frustratingly uphill venture, leaving him no room to glide long. In spite of his exertion, however, Swordfish couldn't help but smile at the sight of what was, in effect, his home. He stood at the foot of a towering mountain, the foothills marked with ridges and ravines of ancient gray stone. The signs of dragon habitation were clear to those who knew what to look for. Deep gouges in the earth where massive claws had carved into the soil in their passing. Paths of flattened grass where dragon tails had slithered through. Scratches and scorch marks left in the stone to denote territory, and large smears of dirt caked onto the vertical slopes that showed where great wingbeats had kicked up clouds of dust as elders landed. And somewhere near the top of it all, he would find Pondhopper's mother. Swordfish felt a tingle of fear. Pondhopper's mother had always terrified him. Even when she was in a good mood, the great worm just had an aura about her that made Swordfish want to hide in the darkest, tightest place he could find. He took a few deep breaths and shook his head to dispel his anxiety. Scary or not, she was Hopper's best shot of freedom. And so, with a little shake of his tail, he resumed his trek. He scampered up the familiar slopes, the scratching of his little claws against the stone echoing around him. Every so often he would pass by the den of one of his elders, where he could just make out the glint of their hordes in the moonlight. Soon enough, he was on the only path that led to his destination. A long, narrow passage wound up the mountainside, like the slithering of a snake's tail. It was hedged in on either side by high stone walls, allowing only the tiniest slivers of light through from above. Ancient moss and mushrooms grew out of the walls, emitting pungent odors that made Swordfish's sensitive nose wrinkle. After what felt like an eternity of climbing, he reached the end of the narrow passage. He emerged into a gently ascending hill, marked with grass and jagged stone. It was surrounded on all sides by a similarly craggy wall that always reminded Swordfish of teeth. If that wasn't impressive enough, the entire hill shimmered and sparkled with countless coins of silver and platinum, like stars stolen from the heavens themselves. The largest mounds of these precious treasures were focused around the summit of the hill, where a trio of natural rock spires rose into the night sky. From his position solo to the ground, they were silhouetted against the pale light of the moon, looking as though they were attempting to pierce it. And there, just barely visible, hanging out of one of the crevices of this ancient formation, was the colossal tail of Pondhopper's mother. Swordfish was nowhere near the slumbering dragon, and yet he could hear her slow, rumbling snores, each breath like an earthquake beneath his feet. He could feel it in the very air itself, as if it were quivering with fearful respect.
And now I have to talk to her,
Swordfish thought, swallowing heavily.
Or maybe I can just wait till morning? Pondhopper will be fine. She was taken to be a pet, not to be killed. And her mom won't be as mad at me if I go to her when she's already awake, so...
Swordfish nodded to himself once, twice, then turned to leave the hill. It was just such a pity that, as he turned, his tail swished across a small mound of loosely stacked rocks, scattering them across the ground with a ruckus. The snoring stopped. Swordfish froze in place, shoulders hunched, wings tense against his sides.
Ah, crud.
The earth trembled again. Stone cracked and splintered, and the air was pulled in towards the spires by a powerful inhalation. Swordfish chanced to look over his shoulder. "Who goes there?" came the booming voice, immediately sending Swordfish into a low, submissive bow.
This is Swordfish. It's Swordfish,
he quickly said.
I'm sorry for disturbing your sleep, Miss Avorix.
Avorix the Merciless, Pondhopper's mother, gave an irritated groan before slowly emerging from her bed of moss and silver. Swordfish tried to keep his eyes glued to the floor, but he couldn't help it. He looked up to watch as the dragon emerged. She was easily the size of a small fortress, with scales as white as bone. Wings larger than Swordfish could ever hope to grow spread from her back in a languid stretch as she rose, blocking out the moon and bathing the hilltop in ashen shadow. Her lips peeled back in a massive yawn, revealing teeth as black as obsidian. Similarly, dark claws grasped one of the spires, cracking the stone and sending large pebbles crumbling to the ground as she pulled herself free. Her eyes snapped open to glare down at Swordfish, and he quickly lowered his head again. Avorix hummed thoughtfully. Swordfish, the little whelpling that spends time with my Pondhopper. I remember you, she stated. Tell me why you are here, hatchling. Swordfish bravely lifted his head.
You remember that Hopper was gonna head out to do some stuff in the woods, right?
Avorix's eyes narrowed impatiently. Do not waste my time, child. Get to the point. Swordfish pressed himself down to the ground.
Sorry,
he babbled.
It's just that, well, she was gonna try and kidnap a princess, and she wanted me to help, but it didn't go well. Pondhopper was captured by the princess and the king's knights. The princess wanted Hopper as a pet. She was hauled off to their castle.
Swordfish wasn't sure what kind of reaction he was expecting from the mother dragon. Maybe a roar of rage at the news and a promise of fiery death upon those who would dare humiliate her baby. Or perhaps a snarling accusation that he was a coward for leaving her behind. He was absolutely not expecting Avorix to silently stare at him like the most boring slab of basalt. He was not expecting her to blink a few times, and he was not expecting her to let off a tired groan. Swordfish?
Yes?
What did I tell you not to do?
Waste your time?
Exactly. Now go away. Much to Swordfish's shock, Avorix turned around and began to clamber back into a resting place. He stared at her, baffled, forgetting to be intimidated by the rumbling of the earth as she slithered away. That was it? A blunt, tired dismissal? No fire and brimstone? No promises of vengeance? Not even a shred of concern? Swordfish puffed up. Okay, now he was just offended.
That's it?
He called out. He instantly regretted saying that, as Avorix froze in place. She slowly turned her eyes back toward him, narrowing them. I believe I told you to leave, child. Swordfish somehow held his ground. Now, whether this was out of bravery or sheer stupidity is anyone's guess. Still, he managed to dial back his tone to something more respectful.
It's just that I mean, Pondhopper is your daughter. Aren't you at least worried about her?
Avorix snorted, emitting puffs of smoke from her nostrils.
Should I be?
Well, yeah?
Avorix turned to face him more fully.
Why?
Swordfish blinked, now becoming confused.
I mean, she's your daughter, and the Knights took her hostage.
Avorix let off a low, rumbling chuckle.
Oh, little dragon. Was it not you who stated that she was taken to be a princess's pet?
Swordfish tilted his head.
Yeah?
Tell me, Swordfish, you who owns more pets than any dragon I have ever known, what is the purpose of owning a pet?
Swordfish looked at her, his young mind thrown for a loop.
What?
Avorix lumbered a few steps closer.
When something, be it a dragon or a human, has a pet, what do they do with it?
They take care of it?
Avorix nodded.
Precisely. If Pondhopper was taken to be a princess's pet, then that means she will be taken care of. She will be safe, protected, and fed. Her life is in no danger, and as such, I have no cause to be concerned for her.
Swordfish frowned, looking down at the ground.
Okay, I think I get it. But
He looked back up at Avorix.
she's still being held captive, and she's gonna be absolutely humiliated.
Avorix, to his shock, grinned.
Good.
Swordfish might have blanked out for a moment there. He worked his jaw up and down like a hungry fish for a few seconds before finding his voice.
Good?
He echoed.
How is that good?
Avorix chuckled.
My child has ever been a brash, reckless, and willful creature, far too eager to prove her worth before she is ready. She needs to learn that her actions have consequences. And so, if she was foolish enough to let herself be captured, then may it serve as a valuable lesson. It will spare me the energy of disciplining her myself.
Swordfish stood there, stunned by Avorix's words.
So, you're just going to leave her there?
He asked. Avorix didn't even nod. She just went back to return to her bed. Swordfish piped up.
But what if the Knights change their minds?
He asked frantically.
What if they get tired of her and try to hurt her?
Avorix only laughed.
And go against the wishes of their precious princess. I doubt it, child. Humans are frail, stupid creatures, but they are loyal to their masters. One of the few traits they have that I can respect. So long as she wants Pondhopper as a pet, the Knights will make no move against her.
But what if they do anyway?
Swordfish pressed. Avorix paused at that. She did not turn to face him, but she did lift her head to gaze at the moon above. When she spoke, her tone had changed. Gone was the almost clinical tone. In its place was a smoldering anticipation.
I invite them to try, and upon their heads be the consequences of their failure.
Swordfish shivered on the spot, and not from the cold. Avorix gave him one last look over her shoulder.
Now be gone. This conversation is done, and I must sleep.
Before Swordfish could say anything else, Avorix slithered out of sight. The earth heaved a rumbling sigh as she settled back into place, and Swordfish was left alone at the base of the hill. He stared at the tip of her tail poking out of its place for a few more minutes before giving off a quiet sigh and taking his leave from the Hill of the Merciless. By the time Swordfish made it back to his tiny little section of the caves, he felt about ready to collapse. It was only now hitting him how long he had been up and active. Between his usual morning hijinks, his long walk to meet up with Hopper, and then his frantic sprint to get back and tell Avorix, he had been burned through what energy he had, which was saying something considering how hyper he could get. But when his own little corner finally came into view, it was like a weight was lifted off his shoulders. He came to a brief stop, just to appreciate the view. Swordfish had made his hoard near a naturally occurring spring in the rocky terrain of the foothills, surrounded on all sides by shrubbery and moss that hid it from view. Other dragons might have found the location confusing or odd, until they learned what it was that made up Swordfish's hoard.
Hey, guys!
Swordfish called in a tired voice to the small army of frogs that had been patiently awaiting his return. They all turned to him as he half frolicked, half staggered to his bed of moss and mushrooms. They croaked in greeting, filling the air with a chorus of ribbits. Some of them hopped from their perches up to him, hoping for a treat of flies.
Sorry, guys. No bugs today. Been busy.
Swordfish apologized to the ones that came bounding up to him. They just looked at him patiently, not quite comprehending his words. He just smiled, pat one on the head, and then meandered to his bed. He flopped onto it, landing on his back and kicking up a small cloud of spores from the shroomy pillow. He stared blankly up at the sky above him for several seconds, his mind adrift. One frog in particular came up to the side of his head and croaked as if with a kind of curiosity. Swordfish looked around to find a larger-than-average brown frog blinking at him. The frog ribbited. Swordfish gave him a drowsy smile.
Hey, Toby.
Swordfish looked back up at the sky, his smile fading.
Pondhopper invited me into the woods today.
Swordfish closed his eyes.
She wanted me to help her kidnap a princess. I said no, and ran off. And then she got caught.
Swordfish sighed. He glanced at Toby, then picked him up. He held the slimy creature in the air above him. The frog's spindly little legs dangled beneath him, almost long enough to tickle Swordfish's nose.
I feel bad for leaving her behind. If I'd stuck around, maybe I could have kept her from getting caught.
Toby blinked. Swordfish snorted.
Oh, who am I kidding? I'd have just been caught too.
Toby didn't say anything. He just stared down at Swordfish with those soulless, beady little eyes. Swordfish groaned.
Ow! What am I supposed to do, Toby? Hopper's my friend, but her mom's not gonna do anything. I don't think any dragon's gonna do anything, really.
He had to bite back the urge to groan in frustration. It was a rare thing for Swordfish to get genuinely angry about something. Mild irritation was common enough, especially with Hopper's antics, but today he was very close to tipping over the edge of being miffed and into being genuinely angry. He found it reprehensible that his elders, the adult dragons that were supposed to take care of their hatchlings, wouldn't do anything to help Hopper. It wasn't fair, and it sure didn't make any sense to him. Why did the other dragons have to be so darn dragon-like? Swordfish closed his eyes and heaved another sigh.
What do I do, Toby? It's not like I can just go in there and break her out myself.
Splat. Swordfish's internal fuming was brought to a sudden, wet, sticky end as a frog's tongue slapped into his eyelid. Swordfish let off a less than dignified squawking sound, recoiling into his bed from the impact.
Gah! What was that for?
He cracked an eye open to glare at Toby. Toby's ever-unreadable expression stared back at him. Swordfish just stared at him for a moment, his brain doing some very impressive gymnastics as he tried to parse what the frog was saying. Toby squirmed a little. And with that profound statement ringing in his ears, Swordfish felt a realization wash over him like a wave of ice from the breath of that one ice dragon that thought he was gross. His grip on Toby tightened slightly, and a big grin spread on Swordfish's face.
You're right, Toby,
he declared.
Pondhopper wouldn't just sit idly by and do nothing if I was in danger, so neither should I.
He sat up onto his haunches, holding Toby out before him like a prize. Toby squirmed again. Swordfish nodded.
Yeah, I can totally do it. I mean, I've conquered a castle before, with that other fire dragon that Avorix keeps around. How hard can it be?
At Toby's blank look, Swordfish's eager grin dwindled somewhat.
Though, then again, I was with Pondhopper that day, and we had that big guy around to keep us safe in case the humans came back. I'd be going in alone this time.
Toby blinked at him but said nothing, waiting for Swordfish to puzzle it out himself. A few seconds passed before Swordfish looked at the frog in his hands, and then around at the small army of amphibians that was watching him from across the clearing. Some of them croaked, and a handful eagerly stepped forward in hopes of treats. Swordfish felt a spark of inspiration. He grinned at Toby.
Wait! I got it! I don't need any other dragons! I just need you guys!
Swordfish stood upright on all fours, tucking Toby under his foreleg and grinning down at his horde.
I have an army right here! If I have you guys helping me, I know for sure that we can go in there and bust Hopper out. What do you say?
There were a few scattered ribbits from the horde, and a few more frogs hopped forward as if to show their willingness to take part in this siege. Swordfish was also pretty sure there was a cricket somewhere nearby, but he chose to ignore him. That was just Jerry, and no one ever listened to Jerry. Swordfish chose to take all of this as a positive omen.
All right! Thanks, guys. Tomorrow, we'll go to the human castle and rescue the dragon from a princess.
He thrust Toby into the air again like he was a sword. Toby croaked loudly and the others answered his call. Now, it should be kept in mind that the frogs were just hungry. And Toby didn't like being held in the air like that and was trying to voice his disapproval. Swordfish, however, the sweet boy that he was, had no way of knowing that. He grinned up at the sky, tail swishing around. He glanced over at another corner of his clearing, where another frog sat watching.
What about you, Kevin? You in?
He called over. Kevin blinked slowly. He looked up at the moon, then affixed Swordfish with a firm look, and nodded. Grinning, Swordfish tucked himself into his bed of moss for the night.
Don't worry, Hopper. I'll save you. I'll get you out of there and save you from whatever awful things that human princess is doing to you,
he muttered, as sleep gradually overtook him. Pondhopper slowly awoke with a groan, unsure of where she was or how she had gotten there. She cracked her eyes open, only to shut them tightly as something bright danced in her vision, eliciting a groggy hiss out of her.
Oh, goody! You're awake!
A familiarly saccharine voice cooed, drawing Pondhopper's attention. She looked up and tried to open her eyes again, taking it slowly this time. As her vision cleared and adjusted to the light, she saw that she was in a very nice bedroom. She immediately recognized the architecture as that of a human castle. The walls were made of heavy stone bricks, and the floor was covered in a plush red carpet. Various windows were set into the masonry, letting in shafts of moonlight from outside. Flickering candlelight came from shelves along the walls, bathing all in orange. A large four-poster bed was set up against the wall off to the left, with an armoire and privacy screen on the other end of the chamber. The most alarming part, Hopper appeared to be in some kind of wooden cage. It was tall, and the bars were too close together to afford her any chance of squeezing through. And there, looming over Pondhopper with the most infuriating of loving smiles, was that darned princess. Pondhopper immediately shot up to her feet and backed away, her spine arching like that of an angry cat. Her eyes darted left and right, failing to find a way out.
Where am I?
She demanded. The princess giggled.
Why, you're home, silly. No, I'm not,
Hopper snapped, baring her teeth.
I'm not supposed to be here. Let me out of this cage, you soft-skinned little...
As she took another step back, her claw bumped into something on the floor behind her. Startled, she spun around to look. It was a large food dish with the word Pinky scrawled across the side in black ink. There was a very soft-looking blue cushion beside it and a handful of gold coins stacked on top. If Pondhopper had fur, it would be bristling in fury right now. A wave of furious indignation washed over her, sending smoke billowing out of her nostrils. She turned back to the princess.
You have a lot of nerve treating a great dragon like a little dog.
The princess just smiled, seemingly incapable of recognizing the fact that Hopper was not happy.
You're just so cute. You wait until I finished your sweater. You're going to look even more adorable.
The color drained from Hopper's face.
Sweater?
She choked out.
Oh, and your bow. A pretty blue. It'll go perfectly with your eyes.
Pondhopper swallowed a lump in her throat, dreading the days that were to come.